Welcome to the Glassworking shop. Well, I thought I'd take a little time off and do a tour of the Glassworking shop and the setup that I have here. It's a kind of an interesting setup. It's somewhat different from a standard glassworking setup. I'm an inventor, I'm an engineer, and sometimes I come up with ideas as I'm trying to learn to do glasswork. And I think I've had some people question about, how are things set up and how I do things. And so it seems like it might be a good time to spend a few minutes walking around the shop. And I'm going to go grab my mobile camera. So let's start out with the glassworking bench. When I first started doing glasswork, I did what a lot of guys do. I used hardy backer on top of a wooden bench, and I found that the hardy backer was pretty close to impossible to keep clean. And so when I rebuilt my bench, I rebuilt it with a metal frame and put some ceramic floor tile, porcelain floor tile on the surface. And this has worked out really well for me. Another thing that I did is I framed it. Let's see if we can get a zoom in here. I framed it with Unistrut. And that gives a kind of a nice benefit of being able to attach things to it. I've got the NQALHA here attached with a bracket so I could move it around if I needed to. I just finished this arrangement in the front with a linear rail and some linear bearings. And let me see if I can show this here. Got a little clamp release screw here so I can release the clamp and then tighten it down, hold it in place. I like having the marver separate from the torch because, first of all, it's more stable and pressing on the marver is not going to move my torch head. And second of all, I've got a lot more adjustability. I've got the marver on an adjustable stand, adjustable both in height and in angle. Then my new torch, the Herbert Arnold, let me see if I can get my yeah, there it is. I can get my finger down here. It's also on a bearing with a lock. And I think this is going to be really useful for things like vacuum sleeving or vac stack, where I've got the piece in the NQALHA set up and I want to ever so slightly and slowly move the torch as the process proceeds without having to move the NQALHA head. Seems to make sense. My fan is a 24-inch diameter fan in a custom-made enclosure here. And the motor is a DC motor because there's something about the physics of fans that a small diameter fan running really fast moves a lot of air, but it's really noisy. A large diameter fan moving slowly moves a lot of air, but it's really quiet. And in order to slow the fan down, when I first got the fan, it was an AC motor, and I tried AC motor speed control, and that didn't work really well. So I replaced it with a DC motor. And then over there is an adjustable DC power supply. And by adjusting the voltage on the power supply, I was able to get the fan to run really slow and really quiet. And of course, I was told early on by one of my teachers that, oh no, that'll never work. You've got the torch facing right into the fan. It'll kill the fan in no time. Well, it's been a few years and it hasn't died yet, so it's probably fairly safe because it is right in the airflow. Even though it's hot air, it's moving air. So moving down to down a level here, people have asked about, what should I use for a manifold for gas and air? And even though I have a machine shop and I could machine a custom manifold out of brass or aluminum or something, I kind of like plumbing fittings. Plumbing fittings are great because you can reconfigure them, you can change your mind, you can unscrew, rescrew, change it, do it again. Also got a piece of steel in the back there with holes in it, which is really handy for attaching things. At the moment, I'm using my new Herbert Arnold 65 millimeter torch. I've also got a Delta Mag, and I'm working on coming up with a quick change mechanism so I can just unscrew a few screws and use quick disconnects on the gas hoses and be able to swap it out if I need the Delta Mag flame. Over here I've got hand torches in variety of sizes, and hand torches work extremely well with the NQALHA. It's almost like it was designed for hand torches, and I really like them a lot. There's the Mirage hand torch and the Lynx, and then a little guy. Say one thing about philosophy here, glassworking philosophy. I like to keep a clean workspace. And this is true whether it's in the machine shop, the woodworking shop, or the glassworking shop. I really like a clean workspace. And I've noticed that some glassworkers have an astoundingly messy bench. I mean, they can still make good work, and I guess, whatever works for you is fine, but for me, I like a clean bench. So I made this rack, and the shelves are made of stainless, and everything is metal so that you can put a hot tool on it and nothing's going to catch on fire. And so I've got all of my tools arranged in a somewhat logical way so I can reach over, grab a tool, use it, put it back. And pretty much the only thing that stays on the bench is I've got a few glass rods for tearing off, and then whatever work in progress I've got on the racks over there. And other than that, I try to keep the bench as clean as I possibly can. I also put my water can kind of down below the bench surface off to the right, and I think it makes a whole lot more sense than having to reach up and over to use the water can at the back of the bench. So, moving back a little bit here, unfortunately, one of the bad things about the shop is that I don't really have that much space to do everything that I'm doing. And so the glassworking shop shares its space with the CNC wood router. And in case anybody is interested, I'm in the process of rebuilding the router with a new spindle that's going to support automatic tool changing. And it actually has some little 30 taper spindles, and so it should work really well. But the unfortunate part is that a wood router generates a tremendous lot of dust when it operates, and then it means that I have to constantly clean up. Every time I use the wood router, I have to clean up the glassworking shop. I do make videos in the shop, and because I'm only one guy and I don't have a camera operator, I need to mount a variety of cameras around the shop. So here's a little cheap Canon video camera with a wide-angle lens for just a wide shot on one side. This is a nicer quality Sony 4K camera with a Didinium filter. And the nice thing about 4K is that I can set it for a somewhat wide shot of the glassworking, and then in post-processing kind of zoom in and still have decent resolution. So, move around here a little bit. Another unfortunate part of the design of this place, that post basically holds up the house. And so it's a 3-story house, and I'm on the ground floor, so can't really do much about it. It just gets in my way. There's the release candidate 1 of the multi-axis hot glass squeezer that I've been working on. And then up above it is a camera mounted to show it in operation. And then up on the ceiling over here, got another camera, another one of those El Cheapo Canons with a Didinium filter looking down on the bench. I'm continuing to work on the design of the squeezer, trying to see if I can whip it into shape and make it into a commercial product that people can afford. And wow, there's a lot of parts in this project. It's not so much that the squeezer itself has a lot of parts, but the squeezing dies. A squeezer and a full set of squeezing dies is over 500 custom-made CNC parts. And I've got a variety of different dies in the set. Probably nobody will ever need all of them, but I've got the iris style dies that can squeeze any size but have a slight downside because they have a little bit of sliding motion when they work. I've got the fixed size dies that the good news is they move perfectly, at least as perfectly as the machine moves. They move perfectly toward the center with no sliding motion. Bad news is you got to have one of every size. I've got in 1/8 inch increments from 1 3/4 all the way down to 5/8 and 6 of each. And boy, that's a lot of parts to make. So, and then down here, I've got some special dies that I'm still investigating the idea of, well, what kind of special dies could we make? I'm gonna, if I do release the product, and if it does end up being used, I'm gonna release the specifications so that graphite tool makers and others who are interested can make their own custom dies, because I think there's a possibility of hundreds of different kinds of custom dies. Down here I've got some various different, there's my chip stack assembly fixture, my 12-axis chip stack assembly fixture, and then the triangle and square rod stack fixture, and then a bunch of other graphite and steel fixtures, and a little kiln. Probably end up outgrowing that one of these days. Then I've got glass storage, my color rods over there. I just put in an oxygen system, and it might be kind of interesting to talk about that for a few minutes. I've got, oh, my jacket caught there. Got 3 Philips Respironics Millennium oxygen concentrators. And these guys were originally sold by Extreme Oxygen, and for some reason, I don't know why, they covered up the Philips Respironics nameplate with their own sticker. Well, not only that, but they painted over the nameplate before applying their sticker. And then when I scraped away the paint, took the sticker off and scraped away the paint, I discovered all sorts of interesting alarm and low oxygen and normal oxygen LEDs that are very informative, and why they would ever cover them up, I don't know. They also covered up the model number, serial number, and hour meter. It's like, what kind of secrets are they keeping anyway? In addition to all of that, they turn up the internal pressure from the normal 7 psi to 15 psi. And I'm still a bit unsure about, well, why is this done? Is it a problem? Is it something that needs to be changed? The consensus of opinion that I get from people who claim to know is that, yeah, it's a bad thing. It's better off at factory spec. As an engineer, I kind of trust the Philips engineers and think they probably know what they're doing. And so I put it back to factory spec of 7 psi. These machines were sold as 15 psi, 8 liter per minute. But when you scrape the paint off the name tag, well, it's a 5 liter per minute machine. So that's what I've returned them to. And they appear to be working and producing good oxygen at the factory spec. I do have measurement tools, which is not surprising because I'm a machinist and measuring is really important in my business. I've got a oxygen purity meter, a propane leak detector, got a low pressure gauge so I can monitor what's going on and make sure that things are doing what they're supposed to be doing. The 3 oxygen concentrators do double duty. So I've got a little Y valve here that feeds both the low pressure air compressor as well as the home fill. So when I'm using the home fill, which only takes about 2 liters per minute or so, it does not require a really powerful oxygen concentrator. The home fill I use overnight to get my high pressure tanks ready for the next day. And then when I'm working, I turn off the home fill and turn on the valve to the low pressure compressor, which is a California Air Tools. And I bought it new and then very carefully cleaned all of the parts, cleaned the tank with industrial degreaser, followed by detergent, followed by water rinse to make it all clean for oxygen safety. And I got the high pressure version that goes to 175 psi. It's only got a little tank on it at the moment. I may increase the size of the tank, but this actually seems to be working really well for me at the moment. I've got a solenoid valve, electrically operated solenoid valve here, so that when the compressor motor is not running, the valve is normally open, and it allows the oxygen concentrators to just vent into the atmosphere, which is really handy when they start up, because when they start up, they aren't producing pure oxygen. So I turn them on, let them warm up, they vent to the atmosphere, then I turn on the compressor, valve closes, and a partial vacuum is created in the line, but the flow meters maintain the flow at the correct level so that it doesn't exceed the flow. Then, following the hose over here, I've got 3 oxygen tanks connected together with high pressure fittings. And then over here, I've got check valves. And so I set the low pressure oxygen ever so slightly higher on the regulator than the high pressure oxygen. So the system prefers to use the low pressure oxygen when it can. And then when I start raging on the torch and start depleting the oxygen in my low pressure tank, well, then my high pressure tanks take over, and I can pretty much rage on that 65 millimeter Herbie. I don't work all day. I'm a part-time glass worker, but for the time that I do spend working on glass, this seems to be an acceptable way to do it. I've also got compressed air coming in. Of course, this is a machine shop, and so I have a nice air compressor outside. And then I've got a pretty good filter here and water removal system to make sure that the air that's coming to the torch is good quality air. And a propane tank, and then over here, got a Harbor Freight vacuum pump with a bypass because doing vac stack or vacuum sleeving doesn't require much vacuum, so the bypass is almost completely open and very little vacuum is actually used to get the job done. Then I got a rack of glass and a bunch of other stuff over here. And boy, I'm running out of things to say. Anyway, that's the glassworking shop. Oh, gotta have a fire extinguisher with an inspection tag. Gotta keep it kosher. And yes, my shop was inspected by the fire inspector, who said, no problem, you could pass a commercial inspection. So, that's the shop. Thank you for watching. It's been fun.